So, have you ever held a perfectly symmetrical, naturally formed crystal and just wondered how it actually got that way? I mean, how do simple molecules without a brain, no blueprint, zero supervision manage to create such absolutely beautiful, infinite structures? Well, today we are going to decode the hidden conversation of crystals.
Right off the bat, we are facing the ultimate scientific paradox here. The universe literally defaults to chaos. Disorder is the natural state of, well, everything. So how exactly do molecules find perfect order in a world ruled by disorder? Why on earth would nature spontaneously build a highly organized crystal out of absolutely nothing?
To really visualize this, I want you to imagine standing in a pitch-black room filled with billions of tiny dancers. Each one of those dancers is a molecule in a liquid. Before any crystallization happens, they're just moving completely randomly. They're colliding, rotating, vibrating, just exploring countless possibilities. At this stage, there's no pattern at all. It's just absolute, unadulterated molecular chaos. Okay, let's dive into this and compare that chaotic liquid phase to an ordered crystal. In the liquid, these molecules have maximum freedom, right? Extremely high entropy. But during crystallization, they lose all that freedom. They get locked into fixed positions and repeating patterns. And thermodynamically speaking, this sudden drop in entropy is highly unfavorable. Nature literally hates losing freedom. And this brilliantly illustrates the delicate negotiation happening behind the scenes. See, crystallization isn't just molecules randomly getting stuck together. We've got that unfavorable entropy loss directly tugging against the highly favorable energy release. So the creation of a crystal is entirely dependent on who wins this molecular tug-of-war.
Which brings us to the invisible language. How these molecules actually communicate with each other without using any words.
That language is actually an intricate hierarchy of physical and chemical forces. We're talking about strong electrostatic attraction, hydrogen bonding, like what you see in ice, or even super weak van der Waals forces. These aren't just random physical phenomena. They act as highly specific, strict molecular instructions.
Because obviously, a molecule doesn't ever turn to its neighbor and say, "Hey, I need to sit right here next to you." Instead, the laws of physics do all the talking. Physics basically dictates, hey, this specific position gives the lowest possible energy arrangement. And the molecule? It simply follows that invisible energy landscape. It is the ultimate path of least resistance.
Now you might assume a hard, solid crystal requires massive, unbreakable chemical bonds. But actually, it's often the exact opposite. Think of a massive suspension bridge. One single, tiny cable is pretty weak on its own, right? But millions of well-arranged, perfectly placed weak connections, collectively, they build an unbreakable molecular architecture.
So let's look at the thermodynamic secret here and exactly why energy ends up winning this battle. The absolutely crucial point here revolves around the Gibbs free energy equation. If you want to know if a crystal is actually going to spontaneously form, this single equation is the ultimate judge. It basically weighs the enthalpy, the heat energy, against that highly unfavorable loss of molecular entropy.
Let's break down the math a bit. When molecules settle into a lattice and form those weak connections, they release stabilizing heat. Nature loves that decrease in enthalpy. But, conversely, locking into place means losing freedom, which drops entropy, and as we established, nature hates that. But as long as the stabilizing energy released is greater than the entropy penalty, the overall free energy drops, and boom, a perfect crystal spontaneously forms.
Now you might be wondering, why do things usually crystallize when they get cold? Well, it's all because of the temperature variable in that equation. Temperature acts as a direct multiplier on the entropy penalty. When you cool a liquid down, you lower that multiplier. Suddenly, the penalty for losing freedom isn't so bad, and the stabilizing energy can easily take over and form a crystal. But if you heat it up, the penalty for losing freedom multiplies, it gets way too high, and your beautiful crystal melts right back into a chaotic liquid.
Let's move to the actual physical process of nucleation and see how molecules miraculously choose the exact same pattern to follow.
Chronologically, it kicks off with random molecular clusters forming and then instantly falling apart in the liquid, basically testing out unstable arrangements. Then, purely by chance, a cluster forms where those attractive interactions are perfectly maximized. It hits a thermodynamic sweet spot, becoming a stable seed. Finally, this little seed acts as a rigid template, perfectly guiding the next generation of molecules to attach, growing layer by layer.
And what is just so fascinating here is that once that initial seed is set, the fundamental building block, what we call the unit cell, takes over completely. This tiny geometric cell contains all the necessary instructions, where the atoms sit, how they orient, how the neighbors connect. It acts exactly like a molecular computer, endlessly copying and pasting its structural code into physical matter until you are holding a visible, perfect gem.
And that brings us to the bigger picture. Order emerging from chaos. Simple rules creating extraordinary complexity. Crystallization is absolute proof that you don't always need a top-down designer to achieve incredible organization. Whether it's birds forming a synchronized flock, ants building complex colonies, cells organizing into tissues, or even us humans forming societies, just like molecules in a crystal, local, immediate interactions create a global masterpiece. The order just naturally emerges collectively.
So when we zoom out and look at this ultimate battle between random freedom and energetic stability, what's actually happening? Fundamentally, crystallization is a negotiation. Molecules are willingly sacrificing their infinite chaotic possibilities in order to gain something far greater, a deeply stable, lower energy, and highly organized existence.
A crystal is truly nature's way of writing a story. Every atom is a character. Every bond is a connection. Every repeating unit is a sentence. And the entire crystal is a molecular poem, written flawlessly by the laws of physics. We've seen today that from chaos emerges order, because sometimes the most beautiful forms of order are simply the most energetically rewarding paths available. So, if non-living molecules can spontaneously self-organize into such absolute, flawless perfection, what other invisible patterns of order are silently shaping the world around us right now?